Steel Pietà. Awakening. Part 4. Awakening.
Custodian's system jolted back to life, unbidden. His black visor immediately flooded with boot-up messages and the manufacturer's logo. Then the image returned, and he regained control of his limbs. He checked the time. 5 hours had passed. He rose to his feet and approached the capsule. The woman was in a deep sleep, her skin slowly reclaiming its warmth as internal pumps whirred, cycling artificial plasma through tubes anchored near her collarbones. He walked over to the central computer display. Stage 4 of 7. Oxygen bridge. Oxygen carrier active. Progress 44%. Remaining time 1 hour, 42 minutes, 21 seconds. Having purged the cryoprotectant, the capsule was now transfusing temporary, synthetic blood. Everything was going according to plan. Custodian called Oscar. The robot answered with immediate concern.
Is everything all right? Did you finish the restart?
Yes. How's the storage search going?
I've secured the essential tools and spares for the oxygen reactor. They're aboard the ship. That's a solid start. My current objective is locating more items, replacement parts and filters for the TCC unit.
Good.
Custodian's voice was flat.
Do what you must, 09.
I was just thinking,
Go on.
given that your fusion cell is degrading, would you permit me to source a replacement?
It retains 19% capacity, sufficient for another 2 centuries. It is functional.
If you insist. However, a new cell would eliminate the frequent system resets and the lengthy downtime.
Not today, 09. Concentrate your full efforts on fixing Copernicus's life support.
Affirmative.
Oscar terminated the link. Custodian only now saw the small information icon next to the system entry. He pressed it, and a log with the frozen subject's details appeared on the screen. He zoomed in on the entry, engaged a full data capture protocol, and began ingesting the file at the speed of a fresh processor cycle. Specimen Alpha F01. Sex phenotypic female. Name Nova. Age biological 18 years. Dimensions 176 centimeters, 63 kilograms. BMI 20.34. Classification Homo compositus. The rest of the log was almost obscene. It contained minute details on hair and skin pigmentation, facial symmetry, and ideal bodily proportions, all coldly cataloged in detached clinical prose. From that point on, the log became far stranger. Nova possessed synthetically reinforced skin. Her skeleton was integrated with an internal titanium ceramic lattice, radically increasing her resistance to acceleration forces. Her muscle tissue was a hybrid of modified type 2A fibers, providing additional strength. Most critical of all was her brain with an augmented synaptic web and a cortical implant linked to service ports at the base of the skull and in the wrist. Custodian, having downloaded the complete colonization archives, instantly classified Nova as a bioengineered human designed for deep space endurance. Yet, shock locked his processors. This degree of preparation, this technical sophistication, was entirely out of place. His records were explicit. The exodus from Earth was a disorganized, desperate flight. Humanity simply did not possess the luxury of time to create colonists this advanced. He displayed the list of people locked in stasis on the screen and read it line by line. Capsule E0G. Patient Alpha F01. Nova. Female. 18. Awakening. Capsule E1G. Patient Alpha F02. Cleo, female, 18, deceased. Capsule E2G, patient, Beta F03, Sarah, female, 17, deceased.
The list contained only women.
Stage 6 of 7. Neural restart. Nanobots. Active. Low-level neurostimulation. In progress. Progress. 94%. Remaining time, 0 hours, 7 minutes, 12 seconds. Custodian took the time to meticulously sift through the available data. The conclusion was simple. This wreck was utterly unlike any registered vessel from Earth. The ship's contents included 240 women, possibly clones, and specialized devoirs containing male genetic material in the form of spermatogonia. Astrogen was clearly conducting a complex genetic experiment here. If only he could unlock the wider archival data. His contemplation was shattered by a voice link activation.
We have contact.
Oscar said.
A two-seater is heading our way.
Where are you?
Aboard the Copernicus. The components are secured. Are you coming back?
Negative. There is one final phase of the awakening still ahead. At least an hour's wait.
Then what is the course of action?
Stay on the Copernicus. Prepare the engines for startup, but zero emissions. If they find me, I will fight. However, this wreck is a massive ship. Perhaps I can slip away unseen with our subject.
With the subject? You think the organism will be conscious enough?
No, I will carry her somehow.
Custodian?
Oscar spoke again.
Yes?
Godspeed.
The line went dead. Oscar recalled the drone. As the reconnaissance machine dived into the canyon's abyss, its rotors switched to minimum emission mode and its heat signature faded. He simultaneously switched the Copernicus's radar to passive, zero-emission mode, turning the ship into an alert ear and a silent listening post at the bottom of the gorge. Inside the Epsilon node, Custodian stood over the only working capsule. Though he knew his revolver well, he still detached it from the magnetic holster, checked its cylinder, and aimed the weapon toward the door. The heavy rectangular block of tungsten and titanium alloy was less a form of self-defense and more a pure hand cannon, perfect for taking down a robot. He clipped it to his hip and knelt by the sarcophagus.
Well, first idealizing humanity, now an arsenal for the apocalypse.
The ghost said as Custodian skillfully mounted a signal jammer on the underside of the cryogenic capsule.
Is this your artifact, your sleeping beauty? And you're going to defend her down to your last drop of oil? You truly are a romantic genius.
He dug a mine out of his backpack and hid it among the dead pods, near the path leading toward Nova. He then ran to the other end of the hall and hid behind one of the capsules. Setting his pack down, he gripped the revolver, called up the mine's detonation program on his interface, and confirmed the armed status.
Grave as a cover. It fits.
The ghost's voice did not leave him, persisting with a new question.
They say a person's entire life flashes before their eyes in the last moments. Do you think that's true?
He did not answer. He looked toward the entrance with the revolver aimed at the ceiling.
Silent. Fine. Have it your way. I already know what you'll witness in your last moments. My face, mocking your stupidity, and saying through laughter, I told you so.
The central computer inside chirped an alarm. A voice echoed throughout the room.
Lazarus Protocol for Capsule E-0G. Neural baseline re-established. Commencing final stage, Awakening. Required operational time, 56 minutes.
The green status diode on the console beside the pod began to pulse with frantic intensity. Custodian forced himself to remain still. Any hope for continued silence was instantly shattered. He sat hidden, blended into the shadows behind the massive bulk of the sarcophagus, which was now his only shelter. The irrational conviction that the announcement had not carried through the rest of the ship was treated by his processor as a logical error, but he could not suppress it. The Lazarus Protocol alarm, with its synthetic commanding voice, must have pierced the wreck's corridors like thunder. Minutes bled into quarter hours, and the only sound within the Epsilon node was a quiet, steady thrum. A layered thrum that Custodian parsed on several levels. The low whir of the cryogenic pump, the thrum of heat processors, and the rush of fans breathing life into the sarcophagus. It was only 15 minutes before the system's projected awakening that he detected footsteps echoing down the distant corridor. The calm, measured sounds grew steadily louder until a figure materialized in the doorway. The bot was humanoid, its body woven from dense bundles of synthetic muscle. It had no face, only blue eyes, and thick synthetic filaments cascaded from the back of its head down its back like implanted dreadlocks. In its grip, it held a plasma shotgun. Custodian instantly recognized it as a military-grade machine. He even knew its designation, a 01 Zealot. Only one such robot worked for the Collector, and worse, the presence of a 01 suggested its bigger partner was probably watching its back. With his shotgun leveled ahead, the Zealot advanced toward the sarcophagus containing Nova. He stopped above it and scanned the chamber. He glanced down for just a moment. The sleeping woman behind the glass was twitching restlessly, like a creature poised on the brink of waking. Zealot attempted to hail his partner, but the signal died before it could leave the room, instantly jammed by the small device Custodian had fixed to the underside of the pod. The machine didn't need a diagnostic report. The message was immediate. Intruder. He muttered a quiet curse, dropped into a crouch behind the human's pod, and began a frantic sweep of the chamber. After a brief pause, the military-grade sensors fed back their data, and the shotgun's muzzle snapped to point directly at the concealed C-77.
Come out!
The combat machine's rough voice commanded. Custodian was cornered. He couldn't shoot the Zealot, who was positioned directly over the critical cryopod. He also knew that if he didn't come out, Zealot would open fire. Its weapon could melt the cryopod in moments. He slowly rose to his full height, his hands lifted in surrender.
Well, well,
The warbot drawled.
the Custodian himself. How many times must I warn you that if you keep interfering with the Collector, one of these days I'll be forced to put you down? You think that day is now? Let's hope not.
He replied, walking slowly with his hands up, the revolver clutched high in one hand.
Toss the sidearm. Slide it along the deck toward me.
The Zealot shifted from behind the pod, moving toward the doorway. Custodian chucked the revolver, which skidded across the deck plating before settling in between them. The Zealot advanced a few more steps toward him, the plasma shotgun remaining fixed on its target.
Just like always, you're flying solo, barely geared up for a fight. What kind of critter did you dig up here? What are you thawing out? Homo sapiens. Are you trying to be funny?
C-77 hit the detonator interface button, and the mine erupted in a fireball that blasted the Zealot off his feet. Custodian leaped onto the deck, snatched his revolver, and skidded across the floor toward the helplessly flying attacker. Sparks showered left and right as pieces of his metal body scraped against the deck. The Zealot slammed into the middle of the aisle, directly in front of him. C-77 drove the muzzle of his revolver beneath the warbot's chin, angled upward toward the processor.
Am I funny?
He asked, and pulled the trigger. The combat robot's nape exploded with debris and blue fluid. Its dreadlocks danced for the last time, and the whole machine went completely still. He quickly rose to his feet and cautiously moved toward the sarcophagus. Less than 5 minutes remained. The girl's eyelids fluttered, and her lips parted slightly to draw a breath. The sight sent his processor into a cognitive loop, making it difficult to look away. Then a noise came from the entryway, as if something immense were shouldering its way through the tight corridor leading to the Epsilon node. He turned to see a massive, industrial machine grotesquely swinging its long arms in a desperate struggle to force itself inside. At the end of one arm, a circular saw spun, tearing into the walls and showering sparks wildly. An orange signal light whirled atop the headless torso. The logger, Zealot's partner, was approaching. Custodian sighted his revolver and opened fire. The first round slammed into the machine's chassis, nudging it back slightly. The following shots gouged the armor and ricocheted wildly, puncturing the chamber walls, which immediately began to weep water. On the sixth squeeze of the trigger, the revolver produced a faint click. The logger reached C77, slashing down with its circular saw with tremendous force. The impact tore him from the floor, and C77 tumbled several meters, coming to rest beside a 01's motionless form. His interface flashed a warning of damage to his right arm. He glanced down. The bicep actuator was severed, spewing a plume of hydraulic fluid. Then, the computer's voice rang through the room.
Lazarus protocol for pod E0G complete. Stasis complete. Subject alive.
The capsule hissed open like an arc, flooding the immediate vicinity with light. The enraged logger standing directly beside it froze and stared into the interior. The orange light rotating on its chassis instantly shifted to red, and a loud blaring erupted from within, signaling an error. The machine recognized that it was seeing something that simply should not be. The ghost shimmered into being to the left of Custodian, who lay prone on the deck. His red eyes turned downward.
What have we here?
He asked, fixing his gaze on the plasma shotgun. C77 snatched the weapon with his left hand and surged to his feet. He sighted with an extended arm and squeezed the trigger, unleashing a rapid burst of blue plasma rounds that superheated the barrel to a fierce red in a fraction of a second. They struck the disoriented logger, instantly liquefying its armor and pushing every possible plate past its thermal limit. The robot stumbled backward a few steps, tripped over the inert cryopods behind it, and crashed down with a deafening impact. The swirling light atop its chassis went out moments later. Custodian stared at the weapon clutched in his hand. It was hissing with heat and smoking heavily. He discarded it onto the deck and rushed toward the newly opened capsule. The pod was already empty. On the deck beside it, a girl with black, wet hair sat leaning against the hull. Clad in a gray jumpsuit that glistened with moisture, her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her clenched fists tucked beneath her armpits. She was breathing heavily, her body shuddering from the post-hibernation shock. She raised the dull gaze of her eyes to meet Custodian's. Following an ancient routine buried deep within his forgotten memory banks, he greeted her.
Good morning. I am C77 Custodian. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
She offered no reply, her eyes fixed on him in an almost feral stare, her face a confused mask of fear and shock. Taking sharp, ragged breaths, her eyes rolled, and then she vomited. Nova fainted a few moments later. Custodian quickly gathered his gear and the recovered plasma shotgun. He then stabilized his injured arm in a carrying position, secured an oxygen mask over the girl's face, and connected a fresh oxygen cassette. He took her in his arms and left Pandora, riding the elevator up to the rock ledge where the stairs began. He passed through the small access door and started down the canyon floor toward his ship. The sun was a molten disk, slowly sinking below the horizon.
Oscar,
He initiated a voice link.
can you read me?
Loud and clear. What's your status?
Minor damage to the right arm. Otherwise, I'm intact. Warm up the engines. We're leaving.
Where to?
Anywhere but here. The collector's crew will be back soon, so we need to vanish.
Understood. I am warming up the engines. How long until you arrive?
15 minutes.
He terminated the connection. Cradling the unconscious woman, he moved on in silence, cautiously measuring every step. Her smooth olive face rested against his worn breastplate, and her thin dark hair softly brushed his armor. He felt the delicate, consistent mass of her body and a compulsion toward tenderness, an antique fragment of code that still glowed beneath his iron shell. The canyon, once drenched by the merciless Solaran sun, now surrendered to the majesty of twilight. Elara, Solara's star, vanished behind the jagged horizon, and the sky burst into color. An inky violet bled into a streak of ruby red, which seeped upward to dissolve into a pale, sea-green luminescence. Shadows grew, transforming the canyon into a labyrinth of black and rust-colored reflections.
They say a person's entire life flashes before their eyes in the last moments.
The ghost quoted himself.
Do you think that's true?
Custodian offered no reply. He simply looked again at the face of the girl sleeping in his arms.
I apologize. I didn't mean what I said back then.
He continued walking, feigning deafness to the presence of his own shadow.
The truth is, if anything surfaces in your final moments before power failure, it will likely be this image. A solitary robot, wandering in the light of the setting sun, cradling the one being who must be protected at all costs. The last hope of an extinct humanity.
Custodian remained silent as a tomb.
I find it difficult to envision anything quite so romantic.
As the Copernicus tilted its nose and climbed away from the deep fissure, it became a tiny, receding point heading toward the fiery disk of Solara as it sank below the desert horizon. At that same moment, deep within the Pandora wreck, on the silent, gimbaled deck of the Epsilon node, the single active terminal on the cylindrical processor flickered, replacing its power depletion countdown with a final, terse message.
Warning. Power failure imminent. 3, 2, 1.
The screen went black. The stubborn red status lights on the silent sarcophagi dwindled, and the last green diode on the open pod failed. Pandora and her box, the Epsilon node, fell into absolute darkness.